Reverend Brother David Owen is the founder of Essene Church of Christ. As a teenager, Brother David was initiated into an Egyptian Essene order by an elderly Essene master named Infinity. David helped the old Essene master create an Essene international community called Essene Garden of Peace. There, David trained for 7 years under the guidance of Infinity in preparation for his life mission, the founding of Essene Church of Christ. The Essene Church uses ancient manuscripts which include the long-lost teachings of Jesus on vegetarianism and reincarnation. Brother David is currently planning congregations of Essene Church of Christ all over the world. The church operates many activities including a home study Essene ministerial training program, an Essene mystery school, and a yearly national Essene gathering. The church publishes many Essene books including the New Essene Testament and the Vegetarian Sayings of Jesus the Essene. Plans are now being made for an Essene cooperative community which will be the international headquarters of Essene Church of Christ. For those interested in contacting Brother David, an address and phone number will be given in the closing credits. Free literature is available. And now, our speaker, Reverend Brother David Owen.
Greetings. I greet you in the name of Yahshua HaMashiach, Jesus the Christ in the original Hebrew. The title of my talk tonight is Essene Teachings on Miracles. And for those of you who have been viewing our ongoing series of televised lectures on the Essene teachings, tonight's going to be a change of pace. We're going to do something a little bit different. In our previous lectures, I've been imparting a lot of technical information using a lot of Sanskrit terminology, Hebrew terminology. Tonight, I'm going to have a chance to basically tell some stories, some of my favorite old stories, and it's going to be a lot of fun for me and hopefully fun for you too. We're going to begin with a chart which is labeled appropriately miracles. And I want to begin by differentiating between the Orthodox Christian, in other words, mainline evangelical Christian doctrine on miracles, and the rather different Essene Christian doctrine on miracles. I'm the founder of the modern version of the Essene Church, and we base our teachings on ancient Essene manuscripts, not only the famous Dead Sea Scrolls that you're aware of, but other ancient Essene manuscripts that have been discovered that aren't as famous, but are actually even more important. The Orthodox Christian definition of a miracle is that God temporarily suspends, sets aside the natural laws of the universe so that something can be done which is, get this part, not in harmony with the laws of the universe. Did you get that? The Orthodox Christian definition of a miracle is that God sets aside, suspends the natural laws of the universe so that God can accomplish something that is, quote, not in harmony with the laws of the universe. Interesting notion, a very different notion we get in our ancient Essene manuscripts. The ancient Essene Christian, original Christians, the first followers of Jesus, the Essene master, miracles are not outside of the laws of the universe. Rather, they are manifestations of, and get this, profound harmony with the laws of the universe. So, with the Orthodox mainline Christians, miracles are considered to be not in harmony with the laws of the universe. Essene Christian definition, miracles are a manifestation of profound harmony with the laws of the universe. Which definition resonates well with you? Well, let's talk a little bit more about this. The ancient Essenes believe that there are three main types of miracles, three categories of miracles, and all the different miracles that you can think of, the miracles of Jesus, the miracles of Buddha, the miracles of Krishna, any miracle that you can think of would fall into one of these three categories according to the ancient Essenes. Type 1 is a karma miracle. Type 2 is a miracle of grace. And type 3 is a mixture, sort of half and half of karma and grace. And I don't expect you to understand these terms yet because that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to begin with type 1, the miracle of karma, and then we'll look at the others. We're going to give certain examples of each type so that you can really get a grasp on them. Type 1 is called karma miracle because your karma is personally responsible for the manifestation of the miracle. Your karma is in personal, profound harmony with the laws of the universe. What are we talking about? Well, we're talking about a being, such as yourself or myself, coming into such profound harmony with the very laws of the universe that we become able to consciously do things with molecules, with atoms, with our thoughts, using our willpower. We're able to create effects in our environment that for most people would seem to be supernatural, and so we get the definition, the term, miracle. So, in this first type of miracle, you, or some other being, is performing the miracle, number 1, on purpose, and number 2, because they are in profound harmony with the laws of the universe. I'll give you some examples. This is where I get to tell my old stories. I'll have some fun. First story, I want to tell you about my old Tai Chi teacher, Mahdi Madina. Mahdi was a black man. He was a Sufi mystic. Interestingly enough, he was a black man from Alabama who became a Sufi. This is unusual. That's the Bible Belt. Well, Mahdi, I know you've heard the term Tai Chi. Mahdi was a Tai Chi master. Such a master that he was considered to be one of the 3 or 4 foremost grand masters of Tai Chi on the entire planet. I studied with him, and first of all, let's differentiate. With Tai Chi, there are 2 basic types. There's one which is the exercise that you've seen people doing sometimes in parks or exercise classes where they're simply doing motions. There's no physical combat in that type of Tai Chi. It's just an exercise and a meditation. Now, in the other form of Tai Chi, the martial arts form, it is like karate, like judo, something that you would actually do physical battle based on circular motions. That is the type of Tai Chi master that my friend Mahdi Madina was. I want to tell you just how spectacular he was. In his living room, there was a light, on the ceiling. The fixture was no longer on the light, so there was just the light bulb in the ceiling. He was able, in the flash of an eye, to leap and kick his foot right past the light bulb. Could have kicked it out if he'd have wanted to. That's a pretty good stretch. You might grab your leg and, if you're watching this on television right now and you've got a light up on your ceiling, just imagine what kind of kick you'd have to manifest to put your foot right next to that light bulb. Well, Mahdi was able to do this, but as you're going to see in this story, he was able to do much more than that. Mahdi and I were on our way to a very, very significant appointment with my spiritual master, a brother named Infinity. We were on our way to this very, very important appointment. We could not be late, and yet it was looking pretty bad. So we were going to have to really make quick time to get there. We're on the freeway, and I notice, and this shows you that I was not at a level of being in profound harmony with the laws of the universe, because I hadn't even noticed that the gas gauge was on empty. That's how unconscious I was at that point. But to cut me a little bit of slack, that was over 20 years ago, and I was in my late teens. At any rate, I noticed that the gas tank is nearly on empty, and we're on a stretch of barren freeway where there are no gas stations for many miles ahead. What are we going to do? I'm very nervous about this, and I say, Madi, I'm very sorry. I forgot to get gasoline. The gas tank's on empty. There's no gas stations anywhere around here. What are we going to do? Madi, then, embrace yourself for this. We're talking miracle here. Madi put his hands on the sides of his head and began to concentrate and to chant. Now, I thought, he was saying a prayer for our predicament. But at the end of his intense concentration and chanting, he says to me, okay, check your gas gauge now. I looked at the gas gauge, and lo and behold, it was now registering at 1/4 of a tank of gas. I was, blown away. I said, how in the world did you do that? Believe it or not, he was rather apologetic. He said that he'd had to split the molecules and atoms of the gasoline, and so it was not going to be very efficient fuel. We'd get poor gas mileage, and it wasn't going to be really good for my car. He was actually apologetic because it was going to be a low-octane gasoline. Because he had to use the material that was there to make more material, and therefore it became low-octane gasoline. Amazing. I saw many more amazing things from Madi Madina over the years. But what I want to show you is that miracles aren't just accomplished by one or two famous personages in history. And I myself have seen other people perform miracles and have heard stories of other people performing miracles. And I'm going to share with you several more examples of this type. Now, the type we're talking about now, type 1, is when a being, such as yourself or myself, is performing the miracle on purpose because they have come into harmony with the laws of the universe. They are able to do things that would look supernatural to most folks, but are actually just profound manifestations of natural law. Now, when I tell stories like this, sometimes my evangelical Christian friends get upset. They get upset because I'm talking about other people, even people of other religious faiths, other than Christian, being able to perform the type of feats and miracles that are associated with Jesus Christ. I remind those dear brothers and sisters, as I remind you now, that in the New Testament, Jesus is quoted as saying, in regard to his miracles, he tells his disciples, all of these things that I do, and even greater things still, shall you do who follow me. So Jesus himself said that we, myself, yourself, have the potential to actually perform what would appear to be miraculous acts. However, he said, if you follow me. In other words, if you follow his teachings, if you bring your life into profound harmony with the same laws of the universe that Jesus was a manifestation of harmony with. So, I tell you another story now. Tell you a story about some friends of mine called the Children of Light. Several years ago, I was on my way to visit an Essene settlement in Arkansas. On the way, I stopped at an Essene community in Arizona in a city called Dateland. And a lot of times when people tell miracle stories, it's places set far off where you yourself have no way of going to substantiate the story. Well, I'm going to tell you right now a story about the Children of Light community in Dateland, Arizona. The community still exists. The people I'm going to talk about live there right now. And you're welcome to make the journey to Dateland, Arizona, visit the Children of Light, and get confirmation on about what I'm about to tell you, because it's an amazing story. The Children of Light, their community is quite amazing because they're all rather elderly. Most of them are near 100, and several of them are over 100. There's about a dozen of them living there now. They create all their own electricity. They live in a profound oasis in the middle of the Arizona desert, growing some of the most miraculous food that I've ever been blessed to eat. I visited them. I enjoyed being with them. I enjoyed the spiritual time. And then one of the elders of the Children of Light, an elderly black man, told me his story about how he came into the Children of Light community. And he told me of the origins of the Children of Light community, the story that I now share with you. The community had its origin in a woman, the founder of the community, a woman named Goldie. Now, Goldie was an evangelical Christian, a Pentecostal. Those are the Christians that believe in speaking in tongues. She was a Pentecostal evangelical Christian minister in British Columbia, and this would have been 60 years ago. She's in her 90s right now. She was in British Columbia pastoring a Pentecostal congregation. She got in an automobile accident, and in the hospital she was actually pronounced dead and then revived. But during the period of time when she was considered dead, Goldie had a profound out-of-body experience. Her experience, when she went out of her body, she was greeted by a number of beings that were blazing light that she calls angels. Then she was greeted by Jesus Christ himself and given a mission. She was told that she was going to go back to her body, she was going to be revived, and she was going to have a mission to go back to her church and go back to the world and preach several things. She was to preach vegetarianism, which she was told while she was out of body that vegetarianism was one of the lost teachings of Jesus. She was told that she was to wear white and gather around her a group of disciples who would also wear white and would call themselves the Children of Light, which, by the way, that's what the Essenes called themselves. The Essenes didn't call themselves Essenes because Essene is a Hebrew word which means healer. Actually, it's Aramaic, which is a Hebrew dialect, and it means healer. And other people referred to the Essenes as the healers, the Essenes. The Essenes called themselves the Children of Light. And Goldie was told by Jesus in this out-of-body experience that she was to call her group the Children of Light, preach vegetarianism, wear white as the ancient Essenes had done, and this is probably the most shocking part for most of you sitting at home on your couch, she was to be celibate herself and to preach celibacy to an inner circle of disciples. Not that everyone in the world had to be celibate, but her inner circle of disciples were to practice celibacy, and they were to prepare for, she was told, the ending of the world that they had known and the beginning of a brand new world. Goldie was revived by the physicians. And remember, she had been pronounced dead by those physicians. She was revived. When she was able to return to her church, because you remember she was a Pentecostal pastor, this evangelical Christian church, when she was able to return to her church, her first Sunday back in the pulpit, Goldie preached vegetarianism. She gave the vision that she had when she was pronounced dead, the vision with Jesus. She preached the vegetarianism. She spoke very powerfully. And as you might imagine, she was fired on the spot. The board of directors held a meeting after she preached that day, and they canned her. It was too radical of a message for that church. So she was thrown out. Her husband, who was on the board of directors, divorced her. About, I'm told, 10 or so of the young people in that congregation, which was over 150 people, 10 or so of the young people went with Goldie. Now, they had this calling that they were to prepare for the ending of the world as they know it, as they knew it, and the beginning of a brand new world. So they went out to a house out in the countryside of British Columbia, and they began to fast and pray. Now the media got wind of this, the whole story of how Goldie had preached that fiery sermon and then taken this group of young people out to this house, and they were fasting and praying. So the media had gotten word of that, and the media was knocking on the door asking if they could come in and have an interview. And they were told no, that the group was into too much intense prayer to have it become a media circus. But on the 21st day of their fast, praying and fasting for 21 days, on the 21st day, there's a knock on the door. They answer it, and instead of being a media type or a concerned relative, they'd had plenty of those too. Instead, this time, it was a man who they described as an obviously holy man. He had an aura of peace and grace. He was dressed in white. He had a long beard. He was elderly. He asked if he could come in. They felt moved to say yes to him. They let him come in. He then, for the entire afternoon, preached to them a really powerful message of not only vegetarianism, but how to take the vegetarianism even further, to get away from the sugars, get away from the white flours, to really get into this pure diet. Then he talked to them about the virtues of celibacy for them as a special calling, although not for most of the folks that would come to them to hear their teachings. He gave them many specific instructions of what they were to do, and then he told them at the conclusion of his afternoon lecture that they were to end their fast. Now, Goldie questioned him on that. She said, "We're fasting and we're in prayer because I was told by Jesus that we were going to see the end of the world as we know it, and we're going to see the beginning of this new world, and we're to prepare through fasting and prayer." The wise man looked at her and said, "The world as you knew it is now dead for you. And the new world that people are waiting for is here and now for you. Live in the new world, in the eternal present moment, here and now." And then that elderly wise man walked through the wall and exited the house. Now that's a rather unconventional exit, not using the door, right through the wall, brothers and sisters. Now that story was told to me by several of the old folks that live at the Children of Light community. They're still living today in Dateland, Arizona, and I encourage you to go visit them, see if you can get confirmation on this story. Another example. My next story, brief little story about a man that you may have heard of. He's living today in India. His name is Sai Baba. S-A-I, Sai Baba, B-A-B-A, Sai Baba. Now, Sai Baba is famous for performing miracles. He manifests objects out of thin air. He has performed hundreds of documented, quote-unquote, miracles. People have filmed him performing miracles. People have gone there expecting to be able to catch him being like a magician, pulling things out of sleeves. They haven't been able to find anything phony about the man. So once again, I tell you, this is a little bit more challenging than Dateland, Arizona. But if you want to go meet Sai Baba for yourself, he's alive today in India, and many Americans, many Westerners do go visit him and do witness incredible things. But my little story is about a man that I personally met because I was living in San Diego at the same time he was living in San Diego. And he was a very scholarly gentleman, a psychiatrist, in fact. Now, when this psychiatrist friend heard about Sai Baba and had friends who were talking about Sai Baba and going to visit Sai Baba in India, and this little Indian holy man was performing miracles, he was told, the psychiatrist could not believe it. He says, no, I do not believe this. He's got to be some sort of a phony, and I'm going to prove it. Now, the psychiatrist was also an author. He'd written several books. So he planned to go to India, visit Sai Baba, catch him in the act of performing a phony miracle, and reveal that to the world. So the psychiatrist goes to India, visits Sai Baba, even manages to get a personal audience with Sai Baba. Now, no matter how much he watches Sai Baba over this long period of time, not only is he unable to find any proof of fakery, but as a matter of fact, he becomes absolutely convinced in the sincerity and the truth and the validity of everything about Sai Baba's performance of miracles. He witnesses things with his own eyes that he knows have to be true. And so, the psychiatrist who went to India to disprove Sai Baba ended up coming back to San Diego and writing a book called The Psychiatrist and Sai Baba, in which he did the opposite, in which he said Sai Baba is for real and his miracles are valid. So, there's an example, again, of a human being coming into profound harmony with the laws of the universe and performing what we would term a miracle. But not because he's doing something outside of the laws of the universe, because he has come into awareness of and profound harmony with subtle laws of the universe. Another example. This one, a personal example from my own life. Not that I performed the miracle, but it's one that I actually witnessed. My spiritual teacher, an old Essene master named Infinity, when I first met him, he brought me back to the land that he lived on, 35 acres, the closest thing to a physical manifestation of the Garden of Eden that you can imagine. Beautiful fruit orchard, beautiful vegetable gardens. In fact, the vegetable patches were all in the shapes of different spiritual symbols and sacred geometry shapes. Spectacular, spectacular experience just being there. Behind his cabin, the elderly Essene master had built a sweat lodge, American Indian style, but not using any animal products. Being a strict vegetarian, he didn't have the animal skins that the Indians would use. Instead, his lodge was made out of mud and wood. After a period of time of heating rocks for a sweat lodge ceremony, I experienced my first sweat lodge ceremony with the old Essene master. And he told me to simply be in silence. Now, this was after a period of chanting mantras. He told me to simply be in silence and have no thoughts. To simply be the watcher with the capital W behind the mind. To be the isness that occupies the physical body. Not running any tapes, no thoughts. Brothers and sisters, have you ever tried to sit there and not have thoughts? Especially if somebody tells you, sit there and don't have any thoughts. The first thing that happens, if you've ever tried this, I could ask you, what's the first thing that happens? Yeah, you start having thoughts. Well, I'm sitting there trying to be in silent meditation, and yet thoughts would occasionally impinge on my meditation. Several times those thoughts were questions. 3 consecutive times I posed questions in my mind and had the old elderly man answer the question verbally. Now, do you understand what I just said? I'm only thinking the thoughts. I didn't verbalize them. He verbally answered the questions 3 consecutive times. Now, after the 3rd time, I knew this was too much to be a coincidence, so then I started thinking, oh man, does this guy have ESP? Is this telepathy? And then he answered that. He said, this isn't magic. He explained that each of us, even you listening to this lecture, each of us is an electro-vibratory system. Each of us is a transmitter and a receiver. Each of us are sending off electrical signals into the subtle ethers around us. He explained that if you were to take a transistor radio and place the transistor radio directly where your head is now, you sitting at home watching this lecture, if you were to take a transistor radio and place it directly where your head is now and put it on your favorite radio station, you would receive that station. Then you could turn the channel and receive another station, turn the channel and receive another station. Do you realize what that means? That means that that radio signal is passing through the very space where your head is right now. Or otherwise, you couldn't put a radio there and pick up that radio signal. That radio signal is passing through the space where your head is right now. Well, you know what, brothers and sisters? So are the thoughts of those in that living room with you right now, if there is anybody in there. You go into a crowded shopping mall. The thoughts of all those people are like just like beaming through the environment, including your head. So you see, what he explained is that his ability to know my thoughts was not magic at all. It simply was a fruit of the yogic lifestyle, of the disciplined lifestyle that he'd been living for oh so many years. He explained that we all have the potential to get to the point where we're able to pick up those signals that are all around us. We simply have to become more attuned to our own electrical vibratory system. So, a miracle? Yeah, by the usual definition. Magic? No. Science, subtle science, advanced physics. We're going to go now to our second category of miracles. You remember I said there were 3 types of miracles according to the ancient Essenes? We've just looked at the first type. Now, that type 1 is a miracle performed by a person on purpose because they're able to do it because they've come into harmony with laws of the universe. That's type 1. That's karma. Karma is your thoughts, words, and deeds produce the miracle. Type 2 is different. Type 2 is the miracle of grace. Grace. The greatest manifestation of grace is that we exist. Do you realize that you and I did nothing to earn the right to exist, to be spiritual souls in the universe? No, that was God's act of grace. Now, once having come into being through an act of grace, each of us are responsible for our thoughts, words, and deeds. And according to our thoughts, words, and deeds, we either rise in consciousness or we fall in consciousness. And this is called the scale of being. The scale of being, you could imagine it like a ladder. According to your thoughts, words, and deeds, you will either be rising on that ladder, rung by rung, the scale of consciousness, your consciousness expanding, or the reverse, contracting. because of thoughts, words, and deeds that are not in harmony with the laws of the universe. Now, with that first type of miracle, you're someone who has been expanding in consciousness, and as your consciousness expanded, you get to where you're able to come into harmony with laws of the universe and perform miracles. The second type of miracle, the miracle of grace, brothers and sisters, it's a miracle that you did nothing to earn. It's an act of grace. It's still a manifestation of the laws of the universe because some being, whether that being be God, Jesus, Buddha, Krishna, name your favorite holy person or deity, some being is in harmony with the laws of the universe to perform that miracle. But you as the recipient receive it not because of anything that you've done that made you worthy for it, but simply as an act of grace. And this is where we get many of the famous healing miracles. As a matter of fact, the example that I want to give you first is directly from the New Testament. I'm going to give you two examples of healing miracles by Jesus in which the recipient of the miracle, the person who experiences the miracle, did nothing to earn it. It wasn't that they brought their thoughts, words, and deeds into profound harmony and were able to affect the subtle laws of the universe. No. They simply received the miracle as an act of grace. Chapter 13, verse 10 in the Gospel of Luke. One Sabbath, as Jesus was teaching in a synagogue, he saw a seriously handicapped woman who had been bent double for 18 years and was unable to straighten her body. Calling her over to himself, Jesus said, "Woman, you are now healed of your sickness." He touched her, and instantly she could stand straight. How she praised and thanked God. A healing miracle of grace, a type 2 miracle. One more example from Jesus. The Gospel of Luke, chapter 17, verse 11. As they continued onward toward Jerusalem, they reached the border between Galilee and Samaria. And as they entered a village there, 10 lepers stood at a distance. Crying out, the lepers said, "Jesus, Master, have mercy on us." Jesus looked at them and said, "Go to the priest and show him that you are now healed." And as they were going, their leprosy disappeared. Amen. Another healing miracle. Another miracle of grace. One more example of a miracle by grace. We go to our chart. A story, another true story, about an angel and a car crash. Sip of my fresh organic orange juice for a second. A young woman that I knew told me that her life was saved by an angel, and this was her story. She was in an automobile on a road late at night. The road wasn't very well lit. There was another car coming towards her, and she realized that the other car, it turned out that it was a drunk driver, though she didn't know this until later. The other car swerved and was coming straight for her. She realized that there was nothing that she could do to avoid that car. The cars were going too fast. The car was coming straight at her. They were about to hit. There was no chance to swerve and avoid that car. And she says right then, she saw come between her and the other car a being of light, an angel, and instantaneously her car was literally like moved 6 feet over to the side. And she missed the other car. The other car ran off the road and was damaged, but the person wasn't seriously hurt, and it turned out to be a drunk driver. Now, when I hear stories like that, not only am I happy, but I'm also a little bit disturbed. Here's why. I ask, why would an angel prevent one car accident and not prevent other car accidents? In fact, I've known some very good people who have been killed in automobile accidents, and I want to know why an angel would intervene in one and not intervene in another. Well, you know, I did some serious meditation and contemplation about that. In fact, one time I was sitting next to a swimming pool and pondering just that question. Just then, I noticed on the water of the pool a bug that was laying on its back and wiggling, trying to escape the water. It had no chance of escaping. It was going to drown. Well, while I was pondering this question about why angels would intervene in one accident but not in some other accident, I reached over and plucked that bug out of the pool and set it on the side of the pool. Now, any of you who have ever been floating in a swimming pool, you know that you see a lot of bugs floating on the pool, and you know that most of them are already dead. And you know that occasionally you see a live one. And if you're in a good mood, or let's say you've achieved a certain level of consciousness and have a great deal of compassion, you'll pick up that live struggling bug and set it on the side. Well, brothers and sisters, there was the answer to my question. Do you see? In the same way that bug that I saved from the pool was able to receive this act of grace, what would seem to be a miracle to this bug. I mean, he's drowning, and all of a sudden this huge hand comes from the sky and picks him up out of the water where he's drowning and sets him on the side to go on with his life. Well, you see, it just happened that I happened to be there and be able to intervene and save that particular bug's life. The fact that there were about 50 dead bugs floating in the pool shows that I wasn't always there and wasn't always able to intervene, and so I had my answer about angelic intervention in car accidents or in other problems. If an angel, if some being of a very high order of existence happens to be around where a calamity is occurring, out of compassion, they're very likely to intervene. But just like myself and yourself aren't everywhere at all times and can't intervene in every problem that happens, in the same way that we can't save every drowning bug, there's not always an angel on hand every time there's a traffic accident about to occur. That was the answer that came to me in my meditation, accepted or rejected. We're going to go to our third type of miracle now, third and last type. Type 3, karma and grace. It's a combination of the first two types. Let me explain. In type 1, we see that miracles can occur when myself or yourself or some other being comes into harmony with the laws of the universe, with our thoughts, words, and deeds, and expand in consciousness. We rise on the scale of consciousness. As we rise on the scale of consciousness, certain abilities that are natural at that level of consciousness, which were latent within us, begin to become actualized, and we perform things called miracles, like Sai Baba is doing. Well, we've seen with grace, we can receive a miracle even though we did nothing to deserve it, absolutely nothing to deserve it. You might even be a person who is committing rather heinous acts, and yet you can get saved miraculously if someone else intervenes on your behalf. You can experience a miracle of grace. Our third type of miracle is a combination of those two in this way, that as I, through my yogic disciplines, through my spiritual practices, I'm a disciple of the Essene Master Jesus. In my spiritual practices, my consciousness is expanding, but let's say my consciousness, although it's expanding because of my work that I'm doing, I'm not yet able to do what my friend Mahdi Madina did, the Sufi mystic, the Tai Chi master. I'm not yet able to concentrate really hard and split the molecules and atoms in my gas tank and create more gasoline out of it. I'm not there yet. Now, I'm working, I'm evolving. So with this third type of miracle, a being of a higher evolutionary order, let's use the term an angelic being, sees myself or yourself or another brother and sister working really diligently, working really in a disciplined fashion in our spiritual practices. And because we're working and we're reaching and we're rising, this being of a higher order who is able to perform miracles reaches down halfway and meets us halfway in an act of grace. But in this case, we actually deserve it. We deserve it because we're working so intensely and diligently at our prayer, at our meditation, at our yoga disciplines, that this being of a higher order actually feels called to give us a hand and assist us in times of need. This is what's meant by the term a guardian angel. Now, I want to give you a couple of examples of that type of miracle, this third type of miracle, the combination of karma and grace. The first example, rather humorously, I call it my walnut story. Here's what happened. This was years ago. I was sitting underneath an oak tree, and it's emphasis on oak tree, because this is a walnut story. I was not sitting under a walnut tree. I was sitting underneath an oak tree in a spiritual dialogue with a brother who, not a blood brother, but a spiritual brother, a brother who was engaging in a little bit of good-natured argument with me. I was trying to convince him that if we simply follow the teachings of our Master Jesus, that we don't need to worry about how we're going to take care of ourselves in a materialistic way, because all of that will come to us. If we put all of our heart and mind and soul on following the teachings of love, compassion, truth, and peace, honesty, and integrity, our daily bread will come to us also. Now, that was the point that I had made to this brother. He responded by saying, "Are you telling me that if I simply practice love and truth, that even food will come my way?" And I told him, that's exactly what I'm saying. When I said those words, that's exactly what I'm saying. At that very moment, 3 walnuts fell from the sky and landed right in between me and this brother who were dialoguing. It was like this incredible exclamation point to what I was saying. Now, I was not at the level of consciousness where I was able to conjure the ethers and create those walnuts and drop them right down there. I didn't do it. But right at that moment when it occurred, I had a knowingness that a being of a higher evolutionary order who was listening to the spiritual discourse and wanted to sort of like add a little bit of influence to what I was saying to this brother, did an act of miraculous grace in support of my dialogue. So you see, I deserved it to a certain extent because I was speaking words of truth, love, and compassion, and this being of a higher order kind of rewarded that by adding a cosmic, miraculous exclamation point. Yeah. And needless to say, the brother I was dialoguing with was quite impressed. Yeah. Brothers and sisters, Our time for this particular discourse is nearing the end, but I do wish to share one more example of this third type of miracle with you. And this one, another rather humorous title, I call this my shoe story. This takes place approximately 15 years ago. About 15 years ago, I'm sitting in meditation out in the mountains, and in meditation, I get this image of these bald-headed guys wearing saffron robes, beating these drums, chanting a mantra. The mantra was, Namum Myoho Renge Kyo. Japanese. I didn't speak Japanese. I'd never had any experience with this mantra, but I'm getting this really strong image of these three bald-headed Buddhist monks beating their drums, chanting that mantra, and the image is of them at the ocean, down about an hour down from the mountains where I was sitting in meditation. I recognized it as Pacific Beach. Have you ever had an image of something like that and wondered whether it's just like, you know, an untrue thing in your own mind, or whether it might actually be a true vision that you're receiving? Well, I felt called to go to Pacific Beach and see if this was really occurring. I drove down the mountain. I get to Pacific Beach, and there's the three Buddhist monks chanting their mantra. I entered into a dialogue with them, and it turns out that they were on a peace walk. They were going from San Diego all the way up the California coast, all the way up through Oregon, through Washington, up to Canada, and then from Canada to New York to the United Nations. It was a peace walk on behalf of nuclear disarmament. They said that they were chanting their mantra and encouraging folks to gather with them and join them on this walk. Myself and several other brothers and a couple of sisters who felt attracted to this mantra and much the same way as I was, were like drawn to these monks at the beach. We then went on this journey with them. We walked all the way up the coast of California and the rest of the route that I already told you, Oregon, Washington, Canada, New York. I went as far as the Oregon-Washington border with them. I walked for over 30 days with them. Midway on this walk, I decided, as I was reading the New Testament, reading a certain passage, I decided to act on the certain passage that I was reading. It was when Jesus, as a sort of a training mission with some of his disciples, tells them to get rid of their extra clothing, to get rid of their shoes, to get rid of their money, and to go barefoot on a pilgrimage and simply trust in God, preaching love and truth. So Jesus sent his disciples on that mission. When the disciples come back from that mission, Jesus asked them, "Did you lack anything?" And they say, "No, Master. Everything that we needed just came to us." I decided to act on it. So I was on this walk already with these Buddhist monks, but I had a backpack with a couple changes of clothes, and I had shoes, and I had some money. So we're going by a thrift store at a certain point of the day as we're walking, and I gave my backpack, I donated it and my extra clothes to the thrift store. I took off my shoes, donated my shoes to the thrift store. Near the thrift store, on the sidewalk, was a bench with an old, what appeared to be hobo, a guy wearing very disheveled clothing, your typical hobo-type clothing. I went to him and I gave him my money. Wasn't a whole lot, it was a couple $100. And I began walking as Jesus had said, barefoot with nothing but the clothes I was wearing. Brothers and sisters, I walked that whole day. This was a peace walk where we got up in the morning and walked until nightfall, and we did that every day, and I was on the walk, like I say, for over 30 days. Well, after just one day of walking barefoot, I can tell you, I didn't miss my backpack. I didn't miss my extra clothes. I didn't even miss my money. But boy, did I miss my shoes. My feet were blistered and sore. The next morning, when we began walking, the first trash can we passed on the side of the road, sitting right on top of that trash can, was a pair of old tennis shoes. And you know, I felt like, having given all of my possessions away, that God was saying, here's a pair of shoes for you, Brother David. So I put the shoes on and I began walking. But after a couple of hours, I began to wonder if I had done the right thing. Maybe those shoes were just there by coincidence. Maybe it wasn't God channeling shoes to me. Maybe I should still be barefoot. So I took those shoes off, left them on the side of the road, and continued walking. About a half an hour later, we stopped for a water break. I went and sat underneath a tree, and an old man approached me. When he got up to me, I realized that the old man was the old hobo that the day before I had given my backpack, or excuse me, my money to. The backpack had gone to the thrift store. It was the same man. I recognized his face. But now he was not wearing the old hobo clothes. He was wearing the white clothing of the Essene order that I was initiated into, and around his neck was the same medallion that I'm wearing, that I was given when I was initiated into the Egyptian Essene order, which is the Star of David with a cross in it. So I realized that this man was an initiate of the same spiritual order. He had in his hand my backpack. He handed it to me. He had in his hand a pair of shoes, the same pair of shoes that I had donated to the thrift store the day before. And he simply said, "The master wants you to have these." And he turned and walked away and put the shoes on. And brothers and sisters, there have been a number of times in the years since then when I've attempted to convince Christian pastors of mainline congregations to give this a shot, to simply give up their possessions and walk barefoot on a pilgrimage, trusting in Christ. I haven't been able to get one to take me up on my offer yet, but I'm very sincere in the offer, because I think they'd be blessed if they ever actually gave it a try. I end now by telling you, miracles are not the goal of the spiritual life. Quite the reverse is true. Miracles are simply a fruit of the tree of spiritual disciplines. They are not to be sought after, but if you sincerely engage in your spiritual practice, whether you be a Buddhist or a Hindu or, like myself, a mystical Essene Christian, if you sincerely devote yourself to your spiritual dharma, to your spiritual practice, the miracles will manifest. They're a natural outgrowth of the spiritual of life. As Jesus said, "These things that I do shall you do, and even greater if you follow me." And so I end with an invitation. I invite you to study the Essene teachings of Jesus Christ with the church that I represent, Essene Church of Jesus Christ. We publish a number of manuscripts that you'll have never seen anywhere else. We publish the Essene New Testament, which is the New Testament as it existed prior to the heavy editing at early church councils, such as the Nicene Council. This is the New Testament as it existed before things were cut out by worldly powers that be. It includes the teachings of Jesus on vegetarianism, reincarnation, the feminine aspect of God. We publish this and many other Essene manuscripts. And for those of you who are really serious, we also have a home study program. This is course 1 of our home study program called The Window. It allows you to take a peek through the window at the Essene teachings and see if they just might be for you. Those of you interested in studying the Essene teachings are welcome to call me. The number has appeared several times during the course of this show. It'll appear again right when I conclude. There will also be an address in the closing credits. You can write to me, call me, and I will personally send you a whole pile of free information. Won't cost you a nickel. I'll send you a lot of interesting items. And with that invitation, I close with the ancient Essene benediction. The spark of God that I am honors the spark of God that you are. Namaste. Peace be with you.